This is VK6 Amateur Radio News with NewsWest for Sunday the 14th of August 2022. On this day, 982 years ago, in the year 1040, King Duncan I of Scotland was killed in battle against his first cousin and rival Macbeth, not murdered in his sleep, as in Shakespeare's play. Macbeth succeeded him as king. I'm reliably informed that neither Duncan I nor Macbeth were radio amateurs. Useless trivia aside, today we're talking amateur radio history. This sequence of Morse code characters is part of our radio history here in WA. Keep listening for the full story. We wish you well in the RD contest or a restful recovery if you're listening in the evening, and I hope the RD contest went well for you. Now let's get on with the news.
From AR Magazine in August 1947, from the correspondent Gremlin. Such nice people. Got a nasty chip on my shoulder. Those unlicensed, misguided individuals who use our bands and our call signs for their pleasure, cluttering up our limited space with their playthings. Put it there, in polite conversation we call them pirates. In scanning the daily paper, have not noticed many prosecutions against these impostors, although we've been getting our share of publicity, haven't we? I thought that cunning box of tricks nicely portrayed in a daily, apparently possessing the clairvoyant power of detecting the unlicensed BCL, would have found the pirate a pushover. Apparently no. Why not? Well, maybe these pirates are cunning lads, they say rats are. Maybe that box of tricks must rest sometimes, or maybe you and I just growl about fungus on our hobby and leave it at that. Was it a ham who inspired some gent to say we British are a far too tolerant race? The time has come for us, in the words of the classics, to get really stuck into these pirates and track them to their lairs. After all, we have the best opportunities for recognizing these individuals, and that's probably half the battle. An up-to-date call book would help. If you know a pirate, point the finger at him. Get him to pass that simple examination I read about. Some will probably say, where do we start? I don't know. Maybe the disposal joints. But I do say, let's get organized and protect our domain. So, into battle, hams, and when you see a piratical head, kick it. And he has a postscript. Unofficial Q signs used by 6WH so that he does not get the OM in trouble with the XYL are QWG, weeding garden, QWC, wood chopping, QWD, washing dishes, QMT, mealtime. I note we still use this age-old and sexist language of OMYL and XYL. I wonder why.
From the Daily News in Perth, Monday the 9th of February 1931, and this was in a regular column called The Broadcaster by VK6 Fox Golf. The title of the article is Radio Time Signals, How It's Done. There are several thousand listeners who set their household clocks and then personal watches by the time signal as given from 6WF. While at sea there are dozens of ships which nightly correct their chronometers by the time signal from the Applecross radio station VIP. Many readers may be interested to know how it's all done. The source of the time signal is, of course, the Perth Observatory facing Kings Park. Up there, set away as far as possible from any ground vibrations, is the master clock. Its dial doesn't convey much to the ordinary individual, but this is the clock which is checked by those infallible guides, the stars. Regularly, usually daily, if weather conditions permit, observations are taken through the big telescope, and as known, stars pass a hairline before the astronomer's eye. An electric key is pressed, and from this reading, the star clock is corrected. Not that the hands are pushed about, for the mechanism is rarely touched. Instead, the results of a few decimal sums is recorded. With the star clock corrected, it's a simple matter for the astronomer, still using an electric relay, to convert star time into Greenwich Mean Time, and from that to Perth time. The star clock is remarkably regular, But to an astronomer, 100th part of a second is a weighty matter and causes mathematics that would break the ordinary schoolboy's heart. A telephone line connects the observatory with the broadcasting studio, and at certain hours of the day a switch is closed which brings the line into operation. And when the hour is reached, a relay works which rings a bell at the studio. The sound is picked up by the microphone and passed out into the ether to travel to listeners at the rate of 186,500 miles a second. It must be admitted that the listener 500 miles away hears the sound a little later than the city listener, but as it only amounts to a minute fraction of a second, it's not likely that the countryman will claim this as one of the disadvantages of living in the agricultural areas. Of course, the broadcast of the town hall clock is a different matter altogether. The time service to shipping is arranged in another way. Automatically operated by a relay, a large drum bearing a number of notches commences to rotate 3 minutes before 9 a.m. Connected to this revolving drum is another telephone line to Applecross, and the notches on the drum spell the letters O-N-O-G-O in Morse code. The speed of the drum is so controlled that it takes exactly 3 minutes for the letters to be transmitted, so that the last Morse dash of the final O indicates accurately the stroke of 9 a.m. Perth time. One can visualise operators at sea following the signal closely so that the ship's time, so essential in working out bearings, will be correct to a split second. It's easily imagined what a boon these time signals are to those on the outskirts of civilization who, before the advent of wireless, had no means of checking the time from one week's end to the other. The city man need no longer miss his train, the busy housewife her tram, the watchmaker can set his customers' timepieces, and the factory whistle can blow on the stroke of the hour. In fact, it is only when we think on the subject that we realise how much man is a slave to old Father Time.
Covering Western Australia and beyond, this is NewsWest, brought to you by WA Amateur Radio News, on air, online and on demand. This is VK6ARN, and I'm Mark, VK4MHQ.
This article is in the West Australian, Perth, Wednesday, the 28th of January 1948. It begins with the heading, Long Antarctic Radio Silence Ends. Pierce operator told of Heard Island adventures as a radio officer off duty at RAAF station. Pierce was making a routine check of all amateur sending stations. He heard a faint signal, radio VK3 ACD Antarctica. He replied, and then came the message, "Thank goodness we have made contact with Australia at last." The party of 14 Australian scientists at Heard Island had been completely isolated from civilization for nearly a month. The Antarctic operator, Mr. Scholes of Sydney, said that he'd been trying every day to make contact with Australia or a ship ever since the naval craft LST 3501 left the island on December 30. The reason for the faintness of the message, picked up late last week, was that he was operating a radio with only a 5-watt output, the size of a small attaché case. This was an amateur radio set that had been carried in case the other sets broke down. The powerful radio transmitters that the party had taken with them were not operating yet, and it was likely that there would be further considerable delay before necessary repairs were made to equipment which had been damaged in the rough landing on the island. One large power battery had been lost in the sea during the landing, and another was smashed when it was dropped 30 feet as mountainous waves lashed the ship. The Pierce operator, Flight Lieutenant Quentin Foster, said last night that he had been in touch with the island several times since he picked up the first message, and the members of the party had asked him to send telegrams to relatives that they were well. Radio messages he picked up yesterday and Monday said that the main aerials, which were massive affairs which were thought to be able to withstand any weather, had been blown down, and the task of setting up official radio contact with the mainland had been made even more difficult. He learnt that members of the expedition had succeeded in erecting several prefabricated huts, but these were not proving as cosy as a home as he had been thought, for sand and snow, churned to fury by the gales, blew in under the boards and swirled around them. The 14 men were snowed in on Sunday, with gales exceeding 100 miles per hour. But on Monday, Flight Lieutenant Foster learnt 2 of the party were out hunting seals with the objective of extracting oil to make soap. The medical officer, Dr. Alan Gilchrist of Melbourne, had found the weather too rough to use his motorcycle, the only machine on the island other than the bulldozer which made the first landfall, except on rare occasions when he had explored around the new Australian settlement. After the more serious business of taking messages for relatives had been attended to, Flight Lieutenant Foster, he and Mr. Scholes had found time for a few light-hearted observations on the comparisons in the weather at the 2 points 2,400 miles apart. At 11:45 Saturday night, when they were having one of their talks, Mr. Scholes said that it was still daylight down there, but he had better sign off as the boys were throwing a bit of a party. I'll write you a letter and you'll get it next Christmas, I hope. The expedition left Fremantle for Heard Island late in November, and it was expected that they would be away from Australia for about 15 months. There are 2 Western Australians in the party, Mr. George Compton of Kalgoorlie, a geologist, and Mr. S. Jones of Fremantle, the cook.
Here at NewsWest, when looking for amateur radio history items, we dig through old amateur radio magazines and the National Library of Australia's Trove website for material. We usually turn up some really good stuff, however we do find that the amateur radio magazine articles are somewhat difficult to gather items from, not because there aren't interesting stories, but it's because of the style of language and writing used. It's simply not suitable for reading out aloud. It was very popular back then, and we see it sometimes now for people in amateur radio circles to write in some form of technical jargon-riddled shorthand. So unless a story is particularly interesting or valuable, we pass it by, because it's just too hard. We can't change what happened in the past, but we can learn from it and change how we do it. After all, our amateur radio publications should be able to be understood by the average person on the street, because our audience isn't only the amateur of today, it's our recorded history for tomorrow. We must take care with how our history is written.
From Amateur Radio, January 1987, editor's comment. And it really looks like it was written today. Squabbling schoolkids. There have always been examples in our hobby of rivalry between those of differing interests or concepts of how things should be. The oldest example by far is probably the rivalry which still exists between those who work CW and those who work phone. For a while, the latter included the subgroups of AM and SSB. We hear little of AM now, although some claim it still has a place. Others may be very uncomplimentary in saying where that place should be. On VHF we have the FM group with its nets and repeaters, and also the SSB operators. Some members of each group can hardly bring themselves to admit that the other exists. Between the exponents of HF and VHF there's often a gulf of mutual ignorance. We have within our own institute 2 groups who handle third-party traffic. Each has its own way of doing things, and tends to consider the others who are ignorant or narrow-minded, or worse. Over to You has carried a number of letters on this theme lately. Then we have those whose purpose in life is to work 300+ countries at the rate of 6 QSOs a minute. They seem to have little in common with those, frequently on the same band, who are content to waffle on for hours, making perhaps 2 or 3 contacts in an afternoon. Dissension develops amongst DX diehards about the activation of rare countries. Aspersions are cast about the legitimacy of some activities. And then, of course, there are operating practices such as breaking in on strangers, deliberate interference, etc. Do you enjoy having it done to you? Of course not. So why do it to others? But if it's done to you, tolerance will help more than blowing your top. The number of divergent groups is even greater than the number of modes we may use. TV, fast scan, slow scan, RTTY, AMTOR or not, ASCII or Bordeaux. packet, Vancouver or Tucson, CW, manual or electronic, phone, AM, FM or SSB, USB or LSB, aircraft enhancement, reflection or refraction, DX or RAGTU, contest or not, WIA or non-member. Of course, the last choice is a ring-in. It doesn't fit, does it? Or does it? Isn't it just another example of the all-too-common rationale that my group is right, or I wouldn't be in it. All the others are wrong. No one's wholly right. No one is wholly wrong. We are all amateur radio operators. If we don't cooperate, we collapse. Rivalry is all very well, but without tolerance we become squabbling schoolkids. This hobby of amateur radio is unique. There is no other with such an impressive capability to unite the people of the world in friendly cooperation. Amateur radio can set an example to the world, to its leaders in politics or commerce, religion or economics, to show how understanding and tolerance can overcome all difficulties. Let us resolve in this year of 1987 to stop our backyard squabbling and begin to show the way. That was from Bill Rice, VK3ABP, the editor of Amateur Radio magazine. Nothing has changed in the last 35 years, has it?
On HF, VHF and UHF via the VK6 linked repeater network, and online, this is NewsWest from VK6 ARN.
We kept you waiting, but it's getting serious now. Perth Tech tickets will be on sale from next Sunday, the 21st of August, at trybooking.com. Just to remind you what you're going to register for. The main event is Saturday, the 22nd of October, commencing at 08:30, followed by a sundowner at 17:30, which will go for a couple of hours. Camping for campers and caravans is available on Friday and Saturday nights, and you can choose to reserve 1 or 2 nights. When you register for Perth Tech, you'll be asked how many tickets you're buying for the seminars and how many tickets for the sundowner and how many nights for a campsite. When you finish entering numbers, click Next and you'll be asked to provide first name, call sign and dietary preference for each person. Yes, you can do several people in one sitting, which means if you're booking caravan sites, you must add up the nights if there's more than one van in the group you're booking for. Click Next and you proceed to the payment screen. Here's where you enter your name, email address and the card details. You can use your credit or debit card to pay. Confirmation of your booking will be sent by email. Please note you'll receive only a receipt, not tickets. Keep your receipt and bring it with you. We'll advise later what the Sunday workshops will be. They may be at different locations and we expect them to be free. Updated information about Perth Tech is on the website vk6.net. Perth Tech, the 21st to the 23rd of October 2022 at the Gidgigana Recreation Centre. Don't miss it. Now here's a nice snippet of historical information. It came from Ian VK3 Bravo United Foxtrot. And Ian says, here is an Australian historical technical item from about 1915. And it was reprinted sometime in the 1950s from memory, possibly in AR magazine. It was written by a fellow called M.J. Martin in 1915 and reprinted in Radio, Television and Hobbies in April 1959. The editor at that time was John Moyle, the name behind the field day. He says, I like this article because it is a careful, thought-out, technical article by a smart guy and completely wrong. There are lessons in it for what we may consider to be impossible today. It goes on to describe why television is technically impossible and infeasible. And instead I liked the closing paragraph. Quotes, to construct wireless apparatus capable of transmitting and receiving 40,000 signals in 1/10 of a second and arrange them in their correct order would surely tax the utmost powers of our cleverest inventors and prove the limit of human ingenuity. So thanks Ian, and that's Ian VK3BUF, for providing that snippet. And you can meet Ian at Perth Tech in October. Ian will be here to talk about his award-winning QRM Guru web-based QRM defeating tool. Now we don't often get feedback about NewsWest, but it's nice when we do, and we really appreciate it. After last week's double-header silent key tributes, We received some really nice, encouraging feedback, and it was appreciated. It really was.
NewsWest next week explores the world of the new amateur. We'll acknowledge those who've gained or new or upgraded licence and hand out some gratuitous but sage advice to newcomers, and this may even prove useful for old hands too. What was it like for you when you first dipped your toe into the amateur radio pond? Would you like to tell us how it was? Believe it or not, your story would be interesting to others. Or perhaps, if you're long past being a beginner and you're an old hand at amateur radio now, and there's something you'd like to pass on to the newbies, that story is also welcome. All you need to do is write it down and record it. Usually about 300 words makes a nice sized piece. You can make a decent recording on a smartphone these days. Just set it to the best quality your device can manage and avoid a noisy environment. If you're a bit uncertain about making your own recording, drop us a line at newswest@vk6.net and we can interview you either face-to-face or via a two-person meeting via Zoom, Skype or similar. Please send all contributions as email attachments to newswest@vk6.net.
Amateur radio, you're standing in it. This is VK6 Amateur Radio News and you're listening to News West.
The NCRG Hamfest is now only a few weeks away. In the meantime, raffle tickets are running out the door fast. So what's on offer? First prize is an ICOM IC705 portable shack-in-a-box software-defined radio with 30 kHz to 470 MHz on receive, transmit on amateur bands 160 metres through to 70 centimetres with power output of up to 10 watts. Second prize is an ICOM IC2730 mobile, dual band with simultaneous receive, a large display and 50 watt transmit power. And finally, the third prize is a Comet GP9 antenna with 8.5 dB gain on 2 metres and almost 12 dB gain on 70 sems. It comes in at a short 17 foot tall. This is a 5-star antenna. Tickets are available via raffle link. You'll find more details and the links to ticketing in the recent post section on the NCRG website. Go to ncrg.info and on the Northern Corridor Radio Group Facebook page. Don't forget, you've got to be in it to win it.
Next weekend, August the 20th and 21st, is the International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend. So once again, the PL Amateur Radio Group will be out operating at a lighthouse. So this year it will be Rottnest Island. Our intrepid portable operators, that is Jeff, VK6 Hotel Delta, and Jerry, VK6 Lima Juliet Charlie, will be at Rottnest on both days. So they'll be on air on the 20th of August, that's the Saturday, from late morning until dark, and again on Sunday for a 8 a.m., probably an 8 a.m. start until early afternoon. So the calling frequencies that the group will use, 7144, 14244 or 14315. And Rottnest Island happens to be in a national park, so the Parks and Peaks identification for that activity will be VKFF 3160. So look out for them on Parks and Peaks. And you can find out more about the International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend on the internet, illw.net, illw.net. So once again, it's next weekend, 20th and 21st of August, and from late morning until dark on the Saturday, and early morning until early afternoon on the Sunday, 7144, 14244 or 14315 megahertz. So good luck to our intrepid adventurers. This is Mark, VK6QI, for the Peel Amateur Radio Group.
Good morning, this is Roy VK6 X-Ray Victor with this week's helpline. The 14th of August 2022. Today I have for you for sale from Tony VK6 Alpha Tango India A Roger Williams Communication HF multi-tap vertical mobile antenna taps on 3.176536059359965. Antenna length 1.910 metres. That's 1910 millimetres. Asking $50 on nearest offer. And have a Turlin multi-tapped antenna also, with taps on too many to mention. Antenna length is 1880 millimetres, asking $150 on nearest offer. It's got about 12 different taps on it. I won't go through them. Complete with heavy-duty spring and stainless steel base. Now we have a Codan type 7727 HF transceiver, complete with 8422 selective coil controller, fitted with RFDS coils and crystals, $75 on nearest offer. There's also a Barrett 330 HF mobile transceiver, upgraded to a Barrett 550 model with 500 program channels, also complete with mounting bracket, remote head manual, 100 watts PEP, 1.6 to 30 megahertz, upper side and lower sideband AM, FF, FSK and CW. Front panel programmable. Fixed channels are programmed via PC or clone cable. Will happily drive 510 and 910 auto-tune antennas. Unit works very well and frequencies already installed. $200 or nearest offer on that one. Contact Tony. That's VK6 Alpha Tango India. Email address is Tango Alpha Romeo Golf Echo November Tango India at aussiebroadband.com.au. That's Tango Alpha Romeo Golf Echo November Tango India at aussiebroadband.com.au. Hope that's as clear as mud. The next item comes up to me by text on my phone. Life wasn't meant to be easy. This one comes from Tony, VK6 Charlie Victor. He has a ICOM IC7300 HF transceiver for sale. That's an ICOM IC7300 HF transceiver. Includes a microphone, power cable, as new condition, asking $1,190. Call Tony, VK6 Charlie Victor. His phone number is 0419 961 399. Again, that's 0419 961 399. And I have a repeat from last week. We have a Bushcom BBA 100 Charlie Sierra with 30 metres of coaxial cable, $100. There's a Zulu 6 Bravo Kilo Whiskey G5RV optimised with 1-to-1 Ballon, 30 metres of coax cable, near new, $100. There's a Cushcraft Ringo Ranger 2 antenna model ARX2 Bravo, $85. All coax cables come with fittings and price negotiable. All inquiries to VK6 Quebec Mike at westnet.com.au. Well, that's it for this week, and we had early close off this week. So if you want to get in early for next week, please contact me, VK6XRay Victor at bigpond.com. I've cleaned up my in-tray, should be able to take some messages in there. If not, text me, 0427 000 995. Till next week, I wish you all 7-3.
Well, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed our walk through amateur radio history. Next week we go from the old to the new, where we focus our attention on new amateurs. Thanks to contributors, broadcasters and presenters. The studio team this week was Andrew, VK6AS, Chris, VK3QB, Roy, VK6XV, Mike, VK6KMS has fallen ill again. Looks like COVID's came back. And I'm Bob, VK6POP, the NewsWest producer. Congratulations to all who had a bash at the RD contest, and remember to submit a log. No matter how small your catch was, the logging software that we told you about can be used in post-contest entry mode, so if you only made some sketchy notes, whack it in afterwards. That's your lot, and if you've done the RD contest this weekend, you could be excused, but the rest of you, get on air and make some noise.